Hello and good evening to those of you watching live and to those of you watching later. Hi, how are you? Join us on the next one. If you want to see more videos like this or just support some fellow nerds, make sure you're clicking that thumbs up and subscribing to Flick and Reel. We are, as always, your source for news, reviews, and daily discourse. Welcome to a special episode of whatever it is that we do here. This is Welcome to AC on DC, and if you're wondering who AC is, we got him over here. That's Andres Ace Cabrera. What's going on, buddy? Welcome to the show. How you doing?
What's up, man? I'm doing good, bro. I like this new title. This is dope.
Yeah, if I were to come up with it, I was like, you know what? Ace has consistently been one of the few people that is like both real about DC on Twitter, but also I think has like a positive outlook on it. And I was like, maybe we're kindred spirits. Maybe we could talk about this, geek out a little bit. Without focusing on, a little bit of the shit show that's been going on recently, talk about some other things, talk about things that are working and that there is put a positive spin on it a little bit and look at potential. I think potential is a big thing when it comes to DC. So, tonight we're not going to be debating Marvel versus DC. We're not going to be fighting over the Snyderverse. We are simply sharing our passion with these characters and why we and you should not be underestimating their potential. So please take part in sharing some of your favorites while we build a collective list of DC recommendations. I got a tab over here. Let me pop it in and out. I'll pop it up here as we add to it, right? So as me and you are talking, as people in the chat are talking, and as people, if they want to like donate and do little recommendations on Streamlabs, we can have that going. I believe it's $1.99, and then you can donate, put a recommendation on there, and we'll add it to the recommendations for movies, TVs, animation, comics, games, and other. And once we're done with this stream, I'm going to post this on Twitter, YouTube, and it'll just be an opportunity for us to share our love for DC and all of us DC fans to kind of unite and stuff like that. So I thought that would be a cool thing to do. Almost done here with all the blah, blah, blah. Actually, I am here done with the blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I made this really cool intro for us, and here it is. Ta-da! Oh, why do I still have this up? I can go down.
Crazy, man. That's dope.
Thank you. I want to talk about it. It looks like we already have a few people in the chat. There is a prompt on there. Just start listing off your favorite people. I see a Wonder Woman already. Cheryl says Dream counts. Yeah, Sandman is DC. It's kind of a little more fringe, but if you read the first few volumes, you get appearances from Martian Manhunter, Mr. Miracle, and then John, I can't think of his last name. One of the first characters, one of the first villains of that was from Justice League. Have you seen Sandman?
I haven't.
It's one, you should. It's really awesome. But for some reason, the name is escaping me right now. But it's Professor Lupin from Harry Potter. What's the actor's name? It's also in Wonder Woman, speaking of.
Yeah, he plays Ares, right?
Yes, Thewlis. David Thewlis. David Thewlis plays him. It's John something. Anyways, long story short. Sandman is DC. Let's bring up... I want to talk about Ace. We talked about this a little bit before we started recording this. Talk about some of the first DC comics that we read. Maybe things that people have or have not read. I know starting out, I read mostly Marvel as a kid. And then I started branching over to some DC. So what are some things that stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, man, when I first saw this question that you gave me, I was a little perplexed, I guess. It's been a minute. Like, it's been a minute if I can remember my first, but I tried to pull way back into my brain, and I remember the Green Lantern, Kyle Rayner. I think
Oh,
it's the first run. I think that was the very first run
and
he
it's
was
Kyle
on.
Rayner that's responsible for the term fridging, right?
Yes, I think
Yes.
so.
Right.
But I do remember him being a huge part of my life, and I remember his first comic. I remember the drop of the action figure,
Oh,
and I had that little action figure. This is early 90s. I'm older than you, so uh, I can
I mean,
I can
yeah, a little bit, but I'm 93, so I'm not too far behind you, right?
but I can attest to having that and remembering that. That's like one of my first memories as a kid is that specific comic and that specific action figure that I believe was launched with it, because I don't think it was in any of the animated shows or anything like that. So that was definitely one of them. I definitely remember Superboy and the Reign of Superman,
Oh, okay.
which came out again 90s, and then I feel like there was another one. I think I have it written down. These are first memories. Um, I think that's it. I think those are the first ones I remember. The only other one I have is Nightfall, Batman Nightfall.
Yeah, Nightfall was one of the first times I remember seeing like a Batman action figure that really stood out because it was like
Mm,
it was the big like kind of like beefy Batman outfit, and also the Nightfall comic I think is when he had the really long ears, right?
mm,
It was a very like definitive design for Batman, and then
yeah.
also of course that's where you get the Bane storyline, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's awesome, man. I don't know if you've read it recently, but I read it a couple years ago. Reread it a couple years ago, and I think it holds up. I think it's great. I love that comic.
It not the comic itself, but maybe some of the adaptations that built off of it. I've always been a little disappointed. I feel like they never get Bane quite right
Yeah.
because obviously in Batman and Robin, right, he was just like the Hulk, but even like less intelligent. You know,
Yeah.
bomb, and then I felt like they were getting a little more right when we did with Tom Hardy with like Dark Knight Rises, but still, I think Bane being like Latino's got to be one of the biggest like elements of the character, right? And not someone from the UK. But interestingly, the cartoons have got it right multiple times, as have like the Injustice video games. So I just have to hold out hope that maybe if Matt Reeves ever gets his hand on the Bane character, we might get a proper look at it.
Yeah. How about you, man? What are your first ones?
First ones I can remember, like I said, I was reading Marvel, like X-Men and Spider-Man comics for years before I really dipped a toe into DC. Like I was always DC from like a fan from like the surface level. Because I grew up when I was 4 years old, I had a Batman costume that I wore everywhere. But that's because I grew up with like the '89 movie and watching that all the time. But when I actually started reading was around the birth of New 52 comics. So that is, I want to say, was that 2010, 2011 when
Yeah.
that started picking up. And then I was reading because a lot of people were saying like they finally fixed Aquaman, and I was like, oh, well, I've been wanting to like really start purchasing my more of my own comics and stuff, and so I started with a lot of Aquaman and Batman New 52. I thought it was great. I think New 52 gets a really bad rap. I think there is things in it that aren't great, but Batman had like a straight just like run that was like flawless for a long time. I love what they did with the Joker in that. Like it was one of the most sadistic Jokers we've ever had. Where he has like his face like stapled on, like he had the doll maker take it off, and it was just really decrepit. And I loved it. So I really New 52 anything. At around that same time, actually around the 2011, is when the Injustice video game, the first one, Gods Among Us, came out, and then they started having companion comic books going along with it. No exaggeration when I tell you that the Injustice comics are some of the best comics I've ever read from any brand, but specifically DC, especially the longer they go. Like it is where this material that branched off a video game, I think, is actually like it's better material than what it was based off of, and it really ran away with it. So yeah, I'd say around 2010, 2011 is a whole bunch of DC comics, but I love all that stuff.
That's great, man. Yeah, I remember around that time maybe a little bit after that time, I started to get into a little bit of the Batman classics.
Okay.
The classic Batman ones. The classic as in like
Frank
the ones
Miller
that you
or earlier.
No, like Frank Miller is one of them for sure, but the ones you always get recommended, like Dark Knight Returns, Long Halloween,
Year one. Oh, I read
Year One.
when Long Halloween was announced to be a influence on the Batman is when I got it on. I think at that point the DC streaming service was still a thing, and you could get comics on there. And so I read through Long Halloween. I didn't get to the sequel. Do you remember what that was called?
I don't.
The one that had Robin in, but it was a sequel story to the Long Halloween. Maybe somebody in the chat can help me out. And I did remember the character in Sandman. I was trying to think it was John D. John D was Dr. Destiny, who is a DC Comics villain, and he is a villain in Sandman. So they're tied. And Constantine's in Sandman as well. So they're all connected. Okay, next one up, and again, feel free to chime in down there in the comics, or in the comments, not comics, but comic recommendations, which could be some things we've already gone over a little bit.
Yeah.
But what are some comics, and this could be, let's keep it to DC, but anything that really stood out over the entirety of your life, just things that you've picked up.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm being honest, Nightfall is definitely one of them.
It's a good one.
I think it still holds up, and I think it's amazing.
Yeah, it's like not omnibus isn't the right word, but like a full set, like just one solid like volume.
Yeah, you'll see it everywhere if you go to Barnes and Nobles or any bookstore. It's like always there, and it's like always super thick. But it's great, and I really do feel like it has a lot to say about Batman's character, his identity, a lot of stuff about his prodigy, about the future of Batman, all that stuff that's inside that comic. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just adding to it totally does. Was it within Nightfall or shortly thereafter that they introduced, is it Azrael?
Mm-hmm. It's in there, yeah.
It's in there, yeah. And then there's a great conversation, I believe, in there between Dick Grayson and Batman about like, hey, why didn't you trust me to take up the mantle instead of this guy? And yeah, there's really good stuff in it. It's great art, iconic story. There's a reason that Christopher Nolan, who seemed like wasn't taking direct inspirations really as he was doing his trilogy. It was all very uniquely Christopher Nolan. And then having Bane break Batman's back is so directly a callback to Nightfall. So you know that it had to really stand out. For me, I brought it up a little bit, but the Injustice, absolutely one. If you're a gamer or you like fighting games, play the game. Both of them, they're fantastic. But also, I think Injustice is a better kind of take on the Civil War kind of story that Marvel did. But I felt like there was, it wasn't just politics, right? For those of you that don't know, and they did make an animated movie, but I felt like the animated movie was a great disservice to the comics. So I don't give the animated movie a recommendation, but I do give the comics a recommendation. It's the story of Superman loses essentially everything. He loses his wife, his unborn baby, and Metropolis all in one fell swoop. It's all gone. And it's what happens to the best of us when unspeakable tragedy hits. And he goes dark for a while. And when he comes out of out of hiding, out of the fortress, he decides there's just not going to be any more violence. There's not going to be any more war. And Superman decides to kind of become like a tyrant over the world for what we would think to be the right reasons, but you can't have that kind of control on humanity. And so it becomes people that think like, yeah, I side with Superman because we have the power and the responsibility to stop these things from happening. And then you have people that believe in free choice, Batman, and all that. And it's year spanning. The first chunk of Injustice comics takes place over 5 years. And if you line the comics up, it's like this thick. I have all of them. And then it continues on to the events of the game. And then it picks up with Injustice 2 comics that continue on after that. And they're all so good. And it's just like a solid read. It'll keep you busy for a while. And I just got really invested, emotional, but because it's like an Elseworld story, there can be deaths, right? You can lose characters that you wouldn't expect to lose. And it has a real, it's kind of grim. But that's my prime recommendation. That, and of course, I got the whole Sandman collection, and if we're technically counting that as DC, then that's like maybe my number one recommendation. But anything else for you, or any questions?
Yeah, for me it would be. I always say All Star Superman. I feel like that's one of my all time favorites.
So, how for you and James Gunn said that was probably likely going to be an inspiration for him for this Superman legacy?
Oh, I think it's great for sure. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because he's not doing an origin, but he said he was doing a younger Superman. Right. And All Star is very explicitly a later stage of Superman.
And I haven't read the book myself, but I did after that announcement. I went and watched the animated movie. Have you also watched the animated movie?
Yeah.
You can tell me maybe like how close am I getting a good idea of what the comic was by watching?
A little bit, yeah, for sure. Definitely the concepts, for sure.
I thought it was really good, and I do get that it's definitely a later stage Superman. But if it's like the wholesome aspect that he's going after, and like how the world views Superman and how Superman carries himself, I can see that as an inspiration. I think maybe there's elements they could pull from the story, but it can't be like a apples to apples. Otherwise, this would be kind of a one and done Superman story. Not to spoil All Star, but
yeah, for sure. I think they kind of want maybe the core of what Superman is in that story for sure. But yeah, there's plenty, man. I mean, plenty of I already mentioned Long Halloween. Obviously, a lot of people love Hush as well. I think it's good, but I don't think it's as good as maybe Long Halloween is for me personally. And then there's one called Batman Arkham Asylum, and it's
Are you talking about the movie or the comic?
The comic. Yeah, it's very different from the movie. And I think it's great. It's a really interesting concept, and you'll know it by the art, but the art is all kind of like skewed.
Like it's a lot of long lines in the art. Like I think I saw like a really scary looking like Joker on the top, and it's all very stretched. I know that artwork that you're talking about.
It's cool. It's really cool.
And I just want to shout out a couple people in the chat really quick. Mike K saying Dark Victory as the sequel to Long Halloween. Yes, thank you. And Garth also doubled down and said they also did Catwoman Win in Rome, which was set concurrently. So good to know. All right, let's move on to the next one. I love talking with DC with you. Ace, thank you so much for coming on here and chatting it.
Of course, man.
You know, we got a big movie crew on Flick and Reel, but not a lot of comic readers. So it's nice to have somebody else on here that's read a few. All right, this is kind of a wide spanning one, maybe hard to think of, so I can kind of help start it off if we want to. But also, again, in the comments, if you guys can think of some underrated characters or characters that haven't gotten their time to shine, please put it down there in the comments. One of the ones that comes to mind for me, just being a fan of like the Justice League Unlimited cartoon, kind of a background character, but I always relish whenever they got the chance to shine, and that's the Question.
Ooh,
I would love to have a very noir style, like whatever like Sin City or like the Spirit and like that style was trying to do and be, but maybe with a little more deft hands behind it for the Question. I think could be a lot of fun. As much as people have heard the name and they've seen him in various things, I think Constantine still hasn't been given its due because Keanu Reeves' movie is a well done movie. It's a lot of fun. Keanu's not my Constantine. He's like an Elseworld Constantine. Like I get what they're going for. Matt Ryan in the show, pitch perfect casting. The show is fantastic. They canceled it halfway through. That's one of the things that that's hinting at something else we'll talk about a little bit later. But I would have loved. I mean, now he's Penguin for Batman, so probably not. But I thought Colin Farrell would have been a really good cinematic Constantine. And I hope now with James Gunn and his affiliation with things that are like dark and decrepit and morbid, that we can get Justice League Dark sooner than later. We know that James Gunn and James Mangold are supposed to be working on a Swamp Thing story, and I'm hoping that maybe that is just our entry point into that world. But Ace, is there any characters that you think either need another chance or just really haven't gotten their time to shine with DC?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to echo what you said. I just feel like it's an entire, I think I mentioned this before to you, it's an entire universe that you can adapt with the Justice League Dark or just the magic users in general when it comes to DC, and I think people got a taste of it with Dr. Fate in Black Adam. For people who didn't know, and apparently a lot of people who watched Black Adam were like, "Yo, they're copying Doctor Strange," and I'm like, "No."
No. Also, when they talked about the casting and it came out, like I was kind of always a little sour on this whole Black Adam thing, to be honest. Yeah. But then they're like, Pierce Brosnan's going to be Dr. Fate. I threw my hands up and I was like, I'm in. I'll be there opening night. Let's go. And then I watched the movie. I was like, you just didn't quite understand what that character is. You gave him a cool costume. You had him do some spells. But it was one of those things where it felt like somebody had heard of the character. They had not done any look at the character. Same with Hawkman. That's really kind of how the Black Adam. But I said this wasn't going to be a negativity podcast, and it's not going to. Dr. Fate's one of my favorites.
There's so much potential there with Dr. Fate, but obviously the one I want to point out especially is Zatanna. I think Zatanna would be so cool, and she's so powerful in so many different comics and in so many different iterations that you can make her.
There she is.
Yeah,
girl.
And she could be like, scaling up or upgrading a little bit more. But there's so many magic characters and magic villains. I mean, Etrigan would be cool. You could bring Morgan Le Fay in with Etrigan as well.
Love Etrigan the Demon.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential there that to me is just. I mean, Felix Faust.
Oh, yeah.
Would be a dope villain to have. Just a lot of like side missions, side characters leading up to like a big battle.
The Justice League Dark animated movie. I mean, they've made a few of them now, but they have the first one that has Zatanna, has Constantine, has. They had to put Batman in it so that people would watch it. He didn't need to be there. However, one of my favorite like Batman related lines is in there is when they're in the Tower of Fate and there is. Not the AI, but kind of like the spirit of the House of Fate is talking to Batman and talks about like how much trauma he has. And she's like, how do you cope? And he's like, I have a butler. And that's just, I think, one of the funniest lines in the animated universe.
Yeah, if we want to mention, I'm sure we'll mention it later too. I don't want to jump ahead, but there's different animated versions that you can check out, the adaptations they have of these magic users, whether it is Justice League Unlimited, they had Morgan Le Fay, do a comedy episode with her son. I forget his name.
Of the babies.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, and then they've had a few episodes where Zatanna has showed up, where Cersei shows up, and they're always kind of fun in a way. But I think those are great, and I think Young Justice does a really good job with it. I think in Phantoms, it's Phantoms the ones that kind of focus on magic, where they have Zatanna doing a little bit more. And they have different people using Dr. Fate's helmet and kind of switching off and on.
I think that might have been the first season of Young Justice with the Zatanna Dr. Fate stuff, first or second. But it was really some of my favorite Dr. Fate stuff and Zatanna stuff. I like what Mike K is saying here in the chat. I've seen a lot of people go like Ana de Armas or some other people, but Jenna Ortega as Zatanna I think could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, if I'm being honest, I want to. It's hard for me to remember because I'm not super smart when it comes to this stuff. But is she Romani? Is she supposed to be like?
Oh, as far as Zatanna, actually.
Yeah. No, like in the comics, yeah, she's supposed to be like half Greek, half Italian.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm not entirely sure, but you're probably right. It's right.
Something like that. It's something because someone else brought it up. I want to give a shout out. She's a DC fan too. She rarely makes DC videos, but her little mentions of it and her other videos are really good. Princess Weeks. I don't know if you know who that is.
I don't, but now I'll put it on.
She's a video essayist. She mainly talks about like vampire shows and stuff, but she's done a couple DC videos. She did a couple of them, but she mentioned how if they do a Zatanna, she really wants them to focus on her origin of her race, which I think is like a specific Greek island. I don't know, something that's very specific to her character, which I agreed with. I don't know anything about it, but to me, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. I would love to see more of that.
Cast accurately, then.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to think if there's other ones that pop off to me immediately. There's just so many characters for me that like almost got their due, but then got their legs chopped out from under them. Constantine being one of them, but also Swamp Thing. Did you watch any of that Swamp Thing show?
I did it. It's
so fantastic, and it's so like pardon me, I believe James Wan produced it or was working on it, but the practical effects that they did in it were so good. Uh, Loved that. It could have been great, but they announced the cancellation before the first episode aired. And so, like, I don't know what you do with that, right? So, like, nobody had a chance to even review it, right? They're like, oh, this is a one and done season. We're pre-canceling it, and so I think nobody really wanted to watch it. And it was a hard watch for me, knowing that it wasn't going to go anywhere. But so yeah, more Swamp Thing. But we're going to get it, and with James Mangold, the director of Logan and Dial of Destiny. So depending on how we feel about Indiana Jones, we'll see how we feel about being excited for Swamp Thing. All right, let's go on to the next one here. Hey, ironically, you were talking about tragic TV cancellations. Now, this can be not just live action, but it could be animated, because I have a handful of both. Do you have any off the top of your head?
I mean, if I'm being honest, there's one that's going on now. I think every single season of Young Justice has been its own thing, and it's been special in its own way. And this last season that I know a lot of people didn't see, that's also going to be probably my TV recommendations.
Okay.
I think people should really give it a chance. And I know the animation isn't up to par.
It's better than some.
Yeah, with what it was before, but it's the story to me that still really stands out. And the way they're able to dive into certain characters, I think is really special. And I think it's tragic that we're going to not get the final season of Young Justice if they officially cancel it. I think it's already been semi-canceled, but not like officially canceled.
After already being born again. And how many seasons did they have coming back? Was it 3?
Yeah.
I feel like it was 2 or 3 seasons after they were canceled the first time and came back years later. And I think this show benefited remarkably from getting off of TV, right?
Yeah.
And getting onto a streaming service where they had their, like, it's still a show that's safe for a younger audience, but it feels more adult and more in line with what the comics often are. And it's just so good. I'll be honest, I'm not caught up. I watched, I think, 2 of the new seasons, so I do think I am behind. Without getting into spoilers for those that aren't caught up, I'll just say there was a wedding involved, and there was like Connor Kent and Megan, and there was a tragedy around that time frame, and that's where I left off. Honestly, the reason that I stopped watching is because that episode hurt me so bad. Like, I was like emotionally devastated, and I didn't pick it back up, which has happened to me before. I did with Game of Thrones too, where just like an episode wrecked me. It took me like 3 or 4 months to get back to it, but I will get back to Young Justice and get caught up because that show is fantastic. And Mike K, I know, is a huge advocate for Young Justice. You can follow Mike on like Twitter and Facebook. You know that Mike's always talking about Young Justice. For me, I've already said Swamp Thing, Constantine. Every time they try to get a Dark Universe off the ground, it gets canceled. In Constantine, first episode, when he goes down into like he doesn't have the Tower of Fate, but he's in just like this, or the House Mystery, but he has it's like an old mill. He has like a magic mill that he hides out in.
Yeah.
And he had the Helmet of Fate, or Nobu's helmet, was in there, and the girl that he's with like picks it up and he says, "Put that down before it puts you down." And they have like all these little Easter eggs for like Magic Universe DC stuff. And then they had introduced the guy, I can't remember his name, but the one that ultimately becomes the Spectre. It's either Tim or Tom Morrigan. I can't remember his last name. It's been a while since I've seen it. But he, throughout the show, keeps getting these flashes to his death. And whenever he has a flash, he sees himself getting shot with like green light coming out of his body and stuff. So they were trying to set up the Spectre. They're doing all these things. Made it 13 episodes. Didn't even get to do the full 20, and it was out. And then Swamp Thing introduced Madame Xanadu, and also the Blue Devil, and like some other characters. And it's like, so Swamp Thing could have also been the jumping off point for like a dark universe, and they just keep knocking them out. And then Constantine got to live a little bit longer on Legends of Tomorrow, but I think the tonal conflict pulled me out of it. I'm not interested in seeing Constantine in that like Goofy-esque kind of world. Doom Patrol, I know, is not continuing after this next season. We have one more. that's that show's wildly fun. It took me 2 tries to get into it, but once I did, I was all the way in. That's a good one. Mike says the Phantom Stranger was introduced as well into Swamp Thing. Yeah. So, animated ones too. The Green Lantern animated show, terrible animation, fantastic story. I think it only lasted 1 season. And I know there's been like 6 different Batman shows, but yeah, those are the ones that I'll put for TV cancellations that broke my heart. Garth said some stuff about Zatanna. Oh, here we go. Zatanna is a member of the mystical species Homo magi. She is not human. I did not know that. Thanks for sharing that, Garth. All right, let's go on to best villains. I also kind of want to say like underrated villains, like ones that we haven't really seen live action maybe. Because obviously, people are going to say Lex Luthor, Joker, like there's a lot of obvious ones out there. But what are some of the non-obvious ones?
Yeah, it's crazy because I feel like the obvious ones are the best villains in all of comics, if I'm being honest.
Right.
Except for maybe Magneto. I still think Magneto is like top tier.
Maybe it is for sure top tier.
If we're talking like just fun villains, I have a lot that
Politic or obviously.
Yeah, so I've always loved some of the side female villains like Killer Frost. I think she's super freaking cool, and there's a lot of ways you can bring her to live action or in other iterations. Livewire is another one for me that I think has always been really awesome and really special.
That's a good one.
Another female one that I think is just special and that I desperately want to see in live action is Lady Shiva. I think that would be sick to bring a Lady Shiva, Cassandra Cain story. Just give me Katana, Lady Shiva, Cassandra Cain, and make it a martial arts.
Cheshire in there?
Yeah, Cheshire. Like, make it all martial arts. Make it like the Shang-Chi of the DC. I think I tweeted this before.
Dude, you gotta be so sold. Dude, you say Shang-Chi of DC. Like, let's
go. It's all pure martial arts. It's all swords and katanas and
it's big Asian cast, lots of
Asian cast, like crazy sceneries. Like, I would love to make that movie. I think I tweeted this out before because I'm so passionate about it. And it'd be so cool to introduce that aspect of DC where you can do the League of Shadows.
Yes.
And you can even call it League of Shadows or League of Assassins. And talk about, like, call the movie League of Assassins, make it all about Shiva and Katana, and make it like awesome martial arts badassery. And I think those characters specifically.
That sounds super rad. We're talking about like
be cool
verses within DC, and like that sounds like the Ninjaverse, right?
Yeah, and Shiva could be the main villain, where she's like carrying the whole plot, and at the end, Raish comes out in the shadows. That'd be so cool.
Raish.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. I think because of like a lot of us, I hopefully I speak for a lot of us when I say like Lex Luthor is a little bit of a tired trope with Superman. There's still interesting ways that you could do them. It just does feel like we always get Lex, like especially if they go the all-star route. And I'm hoping that if James does Lex, that's one of the things he leans on for his interpretation of like Superman Legacy and stuff is maybe doing the all-star Lex, because that is, I think, maybe the most interesting Lex Luthor has ever been is in that story. But Brainiac, outside of I think the Injustice video game, has, and maybe a little bit of animation, hasn't really been done justice. We haven't really gotten Brainiac, so I think that would be super awesome. We obviously with the Snyderverse stuff got our Darkseid tease, but I want to go there. Let's get to Darkseid. Obviously, I'm a fan of like the big, larger than life like Justice League villains.
Oh yeah.
Trying to think. I don't know if it was rumblings or if it was confirmed that Clayface is going to be in the next Batman movie, because I've always said Clayface I would love to be as like a not a main villain, but like put him in somewhere. And if they're doing that in the Reeves verse, I don't know how they'll do it since it seems like a bit more grounded. But if they find a way around it, it could be really cool. We're going to talk about comic recommendations, or did we already talk about? We did talk about comic recommendations. I totally forgot. I had a box of comics right here because I was going to pull out like, hey, you got to read all the Earth 1 books because Batman Earth 1, there's 3 volumes of it, I think. It is a fantastic, it's an Elseworld story, but it's barely an Elseworld story where like they just tweak a couple things so that it's very much the story that you're familiar with, but things are different. Clayface is in the 3rd volume, and it's really cool how they do it. And I think Reeves could do something like that. So I would love to see a Clayface character. Cheetah needs a reboot, so we can forget about the Kristen Wiig version.
Yeah, I feel like that's another side universe that I really was excited for, was the New Gods and was Darkseid, Apocalypse. Just give me all the apocalyptic. Give me Granny Goodness. Give me freaking what's his name, Karabakh.
Yeah, the Darkseid Sun.
Darkseid Sun. Give me Orion. Give me Orion. Yeah. I would love to see Orion.
And is it Big Barda?
Big Barda and the Furies. Yeah. Give me all the Furies. The Furies are awesome. I would love that.
Was it Ava DuVernay was supposed to be doing a New Gods movie before it fell through?
Yeah.
I haven't seen a lot of her work, so I didn't know where my anticipation was supposed to be. But conceptually, at the idea of New Gods, I thought that was going to be a really cool place to go. That's the thing about DC. I mean, Marvel has it too, but Marvel also does often bend over backwards to make sure we know everything's connected, which is one of the reasons why Guardians was as great as it was, because it was so not really connected. DC is like one like pocket universe and after another, whether it's magic, ninjas. Batman's its own brand. Yeah. Like that's why I wasn't too deterred about Matt Reeves being like, this isn't going to be connected. I'm like, that's fine, dude. You have a whole universe to work with. You have your Red Hood. You got a decade's worth of stories, if not more, that you can tell on your own without ever saying the word Superman. So that's fine. But DC itself, there's just so many different avenues that you can explore. And you just got to pick your endpoint, your central point, which Constantine or Zatanna could be that for the Dark Universe. Trying to think of any other big villains. Oh, you know what? If we were to get proper Titans, Trigon would be really cool. I watched a little bit of the Titans show. It's not my jam. It is for some people. That's cool. I don't want to yuck on anybody's yum, but I would love to see that like cinematically a lot bigger. I think the animated movies have done pretty well by Trigon and shown how much of a force he is to be reckoned with.
Yeah, and I love the idea of just being free and tapping into the fantastical stuff. Yeah, Vandal Savage is one of my all-time favorite villains. It's funny because when you said don't bring in the obvious ones, I was like, that's an obvious one. Everyone knows Vandal.
Right? It's like talk to your like average fans, right? Like people that watch superhero movies but don't like deep dive. Do they know who Vandal Savage is?
No, probably not.
Probably don't. So he's kind of that mid-tier, right? Like he's been in a lot of animated movies and shows. He was all over Green Arrow and Legends of Tomorrow. So like he's been around, but we still haven't really gotten like a Vandal Savage.
That's
and man, there's so many people that could have fun playing that role. I think that I would love. That was a good one. I'm just going to. Jim Corrigan. Okay, I was trying to think of Spectre's name earlier, and I was like Tom, something that sounds like Morrigan. It was Jim Corrigan. Thank you. Yeah, he was in the Constantine show. And then Chaz was great in that show too. Chaz was played by Shia LaBeouf in the Keanu Reeves movie.
Yeah.
Interesting choice. Garth says Blockbuster. And then we had like Sportsmaster and Young Justice.
Yeah.
I feel like I think we're supposed to get Black Manta one more time. Yeah. I'm wondering if I'm going to remain disappointed by that. We'll see. I think the costume looks great, right? But they don't.
Black Manta's been one of my favorite villains for a hot minute. I love the Black Manta. Again, I keep going back to Young Justice, but I think he's great in Young Justice. I love him having his own personal little army.
Yeah.
I think that's sick, but fingers crossed, because apparently he's the main villain in Lost Kingdom, so we'll see.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Hopefully, I was gonna say one that we've definitely gotten before, but has never been done well. Poison Ivy. I'm waiting. So the best Poison Ivy we've gotten was honestly the Harley Quinn show.
Yeah, I was gonna say we've gotten a lot of Poison Ivy, but never live action Poison Ivy, like a good version, I guess.
Right. We've had one. We've had Uma Thurman, and then we've had like a few different actresses in the Gotham show. The Gotham show is another one that, like, if you love it, great. I tried it for a while. It's just not my flavor. It's not what I'm looking for. It's kind of like Smallville, where they got so caught up in like, hey, we can't go past a certain point in time, but we have all these episodes, so we need to keep introducing characters that really shouldn't be introduced for like another 10 years. Like the fact that, we had Clark fighting Darkseid and Doomsday when he's in high school. I'm like, well, that's silly. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
I love Maya Hawke for voice.
That's
actually good.
I was like, wait.
That's actually really good. That's not bad casting.
Because that's Uma's daughter.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Good stuff. All right, let's go on to the next one here. Animation. I can't speak. Animation recommendations. There we go. Those are words. I know that you have a laundry list for this, and I'm probably just going to sit here and nod my head for all of them and pitch in when I deem it necessary. But start us off, man. What are some great ones?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm being honest, man, maybe just because I'm obsessed with people doing their homework, I'm like that old man now. I feel like I'm becoming an old man where I'm like, if you haven't seen Justice League or Justice League Unlimited, that's number one. Like, do your homework
now, I think, or Max, as it's going to be, right?
It's still on there, yeah. So make sure you guys. I think it's on Netflix too. Someone said that on Twitter. But either way, make sure that's your homework. That's number one. After that, I would obviously say Young Justice. All the seasons, I think, are, again, I said before, special in their own way. Anything after that is, obviously, there's a lot of different animations that we can get into when it comes to, was it Brave and the Bold? Brave and the Bold is great. It's also on Max. And then...
I've been wanting to start that. It looks like it's a lot of fun, probably.
And then there was, I already said Young Justice. Oh, the animated movies. There's a ton of animated movies that...
Red Hood, obviously.
Yes, Red Hood is another one. But you've seen a lot of those, right? Those animated movies?
Oh, yeah, dude. So they're doing this, like, there's a new animation style in a new series of movies that they're doing that I haven't seen any of.
Really?
Recently. The ones it's like, it looks like the same animation as that New Frontier.
Yeah, I've seen all of them, yeah.
And then they did I think they did a Legion of Superhero ones or something.
Yes,
brand new ones.
I just saw it. It just dropped on Max, I want to say a week ago.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just saw it.
I saw every New 52 one except Darkseid War. I saw
Apocalypse?
Or is that Apocalypse War?
Is that what it's called? Apocalypse War?
It's the one it's Justice League Dark, but it's also
I think it's just called War. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I saw some clips from it, and it's quite morbid.
Yeah.
And it was definitely like the end of the New 52 movies, and for whatever reason, I didn't get to that one. But I watched, Throne of Atlantis, which there's definitely a lot of inspiration in the Aquaman movie for that. Justice League War, I think, is a ton of fun. I go back to that one all the time. The one with they did replace, because I have the comics that's based off. I have like most of the New 52 Justice League run. They replaced Aquaman with Shazam in that, but they're all battling against Darkseid, and watching them learn how to work together and overcome their egos, especially Green Lantern. That's some of my favorite Hal Jordan stuff is in that movie, because he's always like, "Yeah, I got this." And he tries to charge off Darkseid. Darkseid just like wrecks him, smacks him down, and then he gets a broken arm. But they end up like taking out both of Darkseid's eyes. The Batman Superman Apocalypse with Kara Zor-El, Supergirl in it. That's one of my favorite animated movies ever, because if you want a fantastic Batman movie, I actually posted this on our channel or reposted it a while ago. There's a scene where Batman's on Apocalypse and he's able to threaten Darkseid with blowing up his planet if he doesn't give back Supergirl. And Darkseid tries to call his bluff and realizes he's not bluffing. And he's like, no other person would have had the goal to make this threat. And he lets Batman go and take Supergirl, which is great until he comes back for her again, which then leads to like one of my favorite animated fights ever. Supergirl Unleashed versus Darkseid is one of the things
on the farm. Kent Farm.
Poor Smallville Kent Farm just gets toasted. But that's a great one. There's so many great animated things, and whenever I get frustrated with some of the live action stuff, I go back to the animated. I think Assault on Arkham is a better Suicide Squad movie than both of them, even though I would love James Gunn's Suicide Squad movie, but Assault on Arkham is kind of flawless, and it does it in like an hour and 15 minutes. It does everything that the other ones like kind of failed to do in a nice tight runtime, and you don't really need any additional information other than what's provided in those films.
Yeah.
I could talk animation all day.
There's a lot, man. I saw someone say Superman versus the Elite. Mike K. I recommended that one years ago, back when I used to do animation recommendations on Schmoes. I thought that was a lot of fun. But there's plenty. I love. I don't know if a lot of people like this one or not because the animation is kind of off-putting if you're not really into it. But Superman, Batman, Public Enemies, I think is a blast.
Patty's on you right there.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. And I think that one's awesome because it shows like this idea in people's heads of like Batman is better, Superman is better, and it's like they're just homies. They're just the shit, and no one can step up on them. Like you could put the entire Justice League against these two guys, and they're not. They stand no chance. I think it's awesome. So,
and for anyone that's got a pen pad and paper and stuff, if you're writing things down, I'm just gonna say Justice League is it Doom, I believe. The one where they go against the Legion of Doom, and Vandal Savage, speaking of, gets access to the Bat computer and all the different ways to take out the Justice League, which is loosely based on the Tower of Babel comic, me flexing what little bit of knowledge that I have. Really fantastic. And then Crisis on not Infinite Earth. That's
2 words? I think it's 2.
Maybe.
Right?
Yeah, Infinite Earth, I think, is the CW crossover. But
yeah.
Or no, that's the comic book crossover. That's the main comic book crossover. Yeah. Crisis of 2 Earths, I think is what it is. As Owlman and like all the spin-off Justice League characters, but they're all evil tyrants. That's a good one. And just most Batman. Oh, Mask of the Phantasm. Didn't even bring that up. That's a legendary animated film, and the one of the only ones to go to theaters. I like that the only 2 animated movies to go to theaters are both Batman. There was Mask of the Phantasm, and then Killing Joke had a limited run. And Patty confirmed, yes, Crisis on 2 Earths. All right. Well, we're wrapping up. We just got a couple more topics to go over, and then we can let Ace go. I know he's got things going on tonight. But favorite DC games, because this is a category where I think DC, we're not really talking about the DC Marvel war, but they kind of go tit for tat in various different genres. In video games, for the most part and for a long time, DC's been kicking Marvel's ass. I think one of the first times that Marvel was stepped up to the plate was with Spider-Man or some of the Spider-Man games. But for the most part, when you got all the Arkham games, you got Injustice, there's just more going on with DC, I think. What are some of your favorite games and why for DC? I know you say you haven't played a lot of games in a little bit.
That's the tough part. So this one's the toughest for me because I'm not the biggest gamer. Okay. But I obviously have played Injustice and Injustice 2. I have both games. My brother, actually, my older brother, is a massive Injustice fan. He's also a massive DC fan. He's obviously one of the ones that got me into it, being an older brother. But he's obsessed with those games. He loves them, and he played them all the time. And he actually did like a local tournament a couple of years ago where he plays top 3. He always plays as Superman in those games. But I think that's really cool because it lets you know a little bit more of the superheroes, and it's also a callback to the Super Nintendo DC fighting game that existed.
It's like it's 2D, because it's done by NetherRealm. And after they did after they did Mortal Kombat 9 back in 2011, they started making all their fighters back to 2D, and I think that really benefited the game. I think Injustice games are super fun.
Yeah, so that's probably mine.
That's honestly going to be mine too. Obviously, like I said, I have a comic book box that's full of exclusively like just Injustice comics. The story is really great, and I know that's a weird thing to say about a fighting game. If you haven't played it, sounds funny to say, but please.
Who's your main?
Oh my gosh. Which one? It was Green Arrow and Nightwing on Injustice Gods Among Us. In 2, it became Damian Wayne Robin and Catwoman, I think. Catwoman's combos were just gnarly. Like, if I could start it, it was bad news. I don't think I remember how to do any of that, though. Last time I got on Injustice, I went back to button mashing. I had forgotten everything. But yeah, play these fighting games for the story. I promise you won't be disappointed. If you're not a fighting game player, play it on easy. You'll get through it. Really great. obviously, what to say that hasn't already been said about the Arkham games? They're legendary, each and every entry. I know people talk about Origins being the weakest, but it's like the weakest of a near perfect franchise. So like, and plus that gave us a lot of Troy Baker and showed us some of the great, amazing talents for those that didn't already know about how good of a voice actor he is. But so those games are really cool, and I don't think we would have Spider-Man without the Arkham games.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So,
I feel like there's I was gonna mention that I really want to play. I haven't yet, and I know there's mixed reviews on it. Like I was so close to buying it, like
Gotham
really
Knights.
close. Yeah.
I don't know. Like conceptually, it sounded super cool.
I think I'll have fun regardless, even if it's a bad game. I'll just be like, I'm Batgirl. I'm having fun. I'm Red Hood.
It looks like fun. I watched like some of the cutscenes. I was like, how is this 2022 or 3 graphics? Like it doesn't feel right. And I mean, I think like the actual gameplay, the fighting and stuff looked good, but it was like a lot of the in-between stuff and the writing. I was like, this feels undercooked. And then Rocksteady's coming out now with the Justice League versus Suicide Squad, which has been delayed. Or no, not versus. It's Suicide Squad kills the Justice League. It's been delayed about 10 times.
Yeah.
I don't know how to feel about that one. I don't know if
like, it looks okay. Yeah, for sure.
I think Marvel's now starting to come back. I was a big fan of the Avengers game. I know a lot of people were, poo-poo on it, but I thought it was a lot of fun. So we'll see how that war continues to go in the gaming world. But now looking forward, we've kind of dug through the history books to find things that we're really positive about, things that we've enjoyed. And I think a lot of people kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater when they got Black Adam, and for some people Shazam 2, just a lot of lackluster performing and not well reviewed DC films. Like pretty much since the Batman, we haven't had a lot of strong DC entries after that. But we are looking towards the future, and so we want to talk about what our most anticipated things in the world of DC are moving forward. Ace, start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, obviously Superman. I gotta see. Superman's my favorite. Like I always say it's a three-way tie between Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man. My 3 favorite superheroes, but Superman still remains like there's something special about that character, and I just have to see what they do with him. So that's definitely at the top of my list. And then I would from there go to Brave and the Bold. I'm curious what they're going to do with Damian.
Yeah,
I'm so curious because again,
favorite character to hate. I got to be honest.
Yeah, you love Damian, right?
I was like, yeah. Whenever I watch the anime itself, it's like, oh, I want to just strangle. Oh, you want to strangle kids, but
Damian is. Oh my god, I know a lot of people love him, and I know he's softened up a lot in the comics and in other iterations, but
he's the worst, and I love him so much.
He's frustrating. Let's just say that. And then I wanted Tim. I was like, this is gonna happen. I think I told you that last time.
I think
I'm a big Tim fan.
It's going to depend on if they're starting with Damian. I need to know that the others have come already.
Please.
Because if you try to skip it and just be like, Damian's the first Robin, I will have many issues. But if starting a few years down the road, and we've had like Dick is in Bloodhaven, Tim's around somewhere, and Jason's around somewhere.
Yeah,
I'm cool.
Tim is Red Robin. Nightwing is doing his thing. All that kind of stuff. If they do that, yeah, seriously, he's awesome. And I feel like the whole point of this movie. I feel if you're gonna make it a trilogy, it's eventually leading to Bat Family, which again, my giant brain theory can still work, right? Where you still can have Orphan, Cassandra Cain, come in. You still can have Batwoman. What's her name? Catherine Kane, I think is her name. Yes. You can still have her come in. You can still have the entire. You can still Stephanie Brown.
Good, like K-A-T.
Yeah.
And then Stephanie Brown, like you're saying, and then also is it Luke Fox, right?
Yep. Yeah. So you could have Signal, right? Signal is his name.
Oh, I thought Signal was a different character. Because that's the one with the yellow, right?
Yeah.
And then who had like the bright blue lighting and like the wings and stuff? I thought that was Lucius Fox's kid.
Yeah, it's the same.
Oh, did
Yeah.
it? Oh, I don't know. Like I said, I stopped. I haven't read any of the Rebirth stuff, so I'm definitely behind on the Bat Family and some of the other things.
You know what's fun? There's this little comic series that I used to read on my phone. I think it's called Bat Family Adventures. For anyone who's in the comment section, if you know it.
Yeah.
Have you read that?
I haven't. No, I'm listening.
It's really fun, and it's just like a day in the life of the Bat Family, and it's Cassandra, Stephanie, Damien, Dick. I think Tim is in there, and then it's Lucas as well. And it's really fun. It's really, really fun, and it's cute, and it's like a day in the life of the Bat Family. But it makes you want to see a Bat Family movie, which I think would be awesome.
I will give James everything I have to get Titan cinematically. I want Starfire, and if you're telling me Dick's already like in his 20s or something like that,
good point.
Give me Dick and
Raven.
Raven, all that stuff. I'm with you though. Superman Legacy, obviously a huge fan of. I always like hesitate to say this because people think it means something that it doesn't. I'm a huge avid Man of Steel defender. I don't have a lot of praise to say post Man of Steel. I love that first entry, and then I have a lot of complicated feelings after that. I like that interpretation, but I'm also very excited to get something that's more akin to the Justice League animated original stuff that we saw. Although I also liked Superman in the New 52 animated stuff that they did, where he was a little bit more cocky. He had a little bit of an ego with him. He wasn't just a Boy Scout. I really like Superman a lot of different ways. I don't think there's a singular right way to do it. But I'm really excited about what James wants to do with it, right? And he wants to lean on the Christopher Reeves and modernize it a little bit.
Did you see Smallville?
I watched a couple seasons of Smallville.
Oh wow, you didn't get? Yeah, that's surprising. I thought you would be
It's a little goofy for me.
It is goofy, but I saw it when I was like 10, so it doesn't. It came out in 2001.
I didn't have the CW when it was on.
Yeah.
So when I was like 20, I tried to like watch it online, and I watched like 2 seasons of it. And I was like 20. I was like, this is a lot of episodes, and I did say that Michael Rosenbaum is the best on-screen Lex we've ever had, 100%. And he was the reason I tried to be optimistic about Jesse Eisenberg being cast, because I was like, oh, if Jesse can play it something similar to like Michael Rosenbaum, we might have something. That's not what happened, ladies and gentlemen.
No, I was off the train when they announced it. I saw the movie. I tried really hard, and I've been off the train ever since. It almost kind of ruined the movie, for being honest. It was.
I don't know if there's I've heard mixed reports, but if there is any, what's what I'm looking for? If it's possible that Nicholas Hoult actually is Lex Luthor in Superman Legacy, I'm down for that. I think he could definitely play the Lex that I want to see.
No.
Smart, intelligent. I think he could play with an ego. I think he could also be charming. I think we could sometimes root for him and then other times hate him. Lex needs to be a multifaceted villain.
Yes. He has to be kind of gray.
He has to be kind of great because eventually we have to believe he can be voted as president, right?
Yeah. President
Luthor. And it's a fine line to walk. Like, obviously they nipped that in the bud with the Eisenberg Lex, because like, well, he's a blatant criminal. Like, there's no way, and everybody hates him. So I think that would be really cool.
But the thing about Superman for me, just kind of final thoughts here for me, is the fact that I know there's a lot of discourse happening right now if you're anywhere on DC Twitter. Obviously, because DC Twitter is a mess. It's insane. That's the
purpose of this video, right? I wanted to have like some decent DC discourse.
It's this weird. It's like the Super Snyder and then the Super like gone. He's done everything right, even though we haven't seen what he's done yet. Right. But it's like the idea of Superman to me is like, man, I think you guys are lost on what is Superman. And if you don't like this character, that's cool. But I think this idea of like Superman is this crazy psycho badass who snaps necks and spins head off, and I'm like, that's Omni-Man, that's
Right.
Homelander, and
Also,
you guys like those guys, and I don't like those guys.
They missed that bit in Man of Steel where it was the most devastating thing he'd ever done.
Yes, it's supposed to be
like that,
really hard. Yeah,
it wrecked him. Like this person had gone around murdering people like this whole movie, and he had to kill the last other Kryptonian, and he dropped to his knees, and there's like this scream of agony, and that resonated with me emotionally. And there's a lot of people that went like, "F yeah, that's badass." I was like, "Wrong message, guys.
Wrong
message."
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people, if we're being honest here, because I'm a Snyder defender, I think a lot of people miss it when they watch his. They're missing the messages on every single one of his movies, even the last one.
They're seeing the surface, and like, I have mixed feelings on Snyder. Right, I kind of go both ways on him because sometimes I find him like incredibly frustrating and shallow in moments, but then also like very intelligent and deep in other moments, and it just really goes to both ends of the spectrum, like playing Pong. But I agree with you. There's a lot of people that just see like visually he does a lot of really cool stuff, and they latch onto that, and they're missing anything. Like there's so many good nuggets in that Ultimate Edition of BVS that people don't talk about.
Yeah.
The movie's still messy, don't get me wrong, and nothing saves the third act of it. But there's some really good like Clark and Bruce stuff that's in there.
And I feel like you can have both. I think someone said it best on Twitter, where it's like, that's why he's Superman, because he can be the kind of guy, like you said a little bit about New 52. I'm not the biggest Superman fan of New 52. That's probably my biggest downside of New 52. Yet I still feel like that's always been inherent in what Clark is. Clark has always been kind of like I don't know, like he's there you go.
Earth One, like they're either fantastic or they suck. There's not really an in between. Like Superman, Batman are like 3 for 3 awesome comics. Then they did a Green Lantern and a Wonder Woman that were not good. And I haven't read the Aquaman or the Titans yet.
Yeah,
but
to me, it's like if you watch Smallville, there's a couple episodes. I'm rewatching it right now where Clark does. He is kind of like the kind of guy where there's this episode where these 4 guys jump him and they're high on kryptonite superpowers. Mm-hmm. So they're able to beat him up a little bit, and they throw him into a furnace. And then the next day he gets him caught at school, and he's standing outside the school, staring them down as they're getting arrested. And Clark is like looking at him like, that was me, man. I'm still like, he is kind of that slight cockiness where he will save kids, he will have responsibility, but if you push him and if you step on his family and step on his people,
he's supposed to be human. He's supposed to be a boy from Kansas.
Yeah,
right?
He will get mad and he will do some Superman punching. That's why he's cool.
I promise, because if I hang on Man of Steel too long, I'll do like a whole different podcast. Yeah. But in Man of Steel, in the bar, when that guy's harassing him, he just takes it until he walks outside and puts all the like electricity posts through the guy's semi truck. And I was like, he's just a guy. Like he did not punch this dude through the wall, but he ruined his livelihood,
Yeah.
And that's what I like. I like that line of like, yeah, he's better than most of us, because most of us would have put him through the wall. He showed restraint. And the thing is that he's always supposed to be a little bit better than us, but also believable. And that's a hard line to. It's like Captain America, right? Captain America, we knew was going to be a really hard character for them to bring to screen, but I think they did a great job of making him better than most of us, but he would make human errors. Yeah. So we're hoping for that.
Crossed.
I will drop that. James Mangold and Swamp Thing has me incredibly excited. Looking forward to the animated things, because I feel like that's where James Gunn's really going to get to flex his like gun-isms, because I feel like with Legacy he's going to have to pull back a little bit, but I know on Creature Commandos it's going to be like what we got with the Suicide Squad, plus the voice cast is fantastic. And he said this is just like a third of his like first phase of the Gods and Monsters, like, so we haven't seen anything yet, and I can't wait personally. Is there any last things that you want to say before we finish up here? And again, thank you so much for coming on here and speaking DC.
Yeah, I'll say what I said on my live stream on Monday, where I talked about DC news and DC stuff and DC casting, where the one thing I do hope, and I know I apparently everyone got mad at me when I said this, but I do hope that James Gunn and his new DC vision kind of looks into the deeper messages of these comics, because I do feel like I don't want it to be just status quo, Batman, Superman, the usual stuff we've seen before. I want to see more side characters, more development into characters that push the boundaries. Whether we have right here, I could see him, Simon Baz, Jessica Cruz, Static Shock.
Right here, right?
Yeah, like those are characters that have their identity be such a huge part of their character, and I want to see those characters. That's why I mentioned Zatanna being accurately represented, because DC has always been on the forefront of pushing these characters that do have a different perspective and identity, and I don't want it to just be Batman, big white guy, Superman, big white guy, and I'm just like, right. I love it, but give me something else.
The production before James came along. I hope Blue Beetle's fantastic. I thought the trailer was fun. You know, that's why I made sure to throw it in the little video that I put together. Looking forward to Blue Beetle. I think to speak to that, Static Shock would be really great. I'd love to see Static, and I think James responded to somebody somewhere on Twitter where he's like, he has plans for the Icon section of the DC universe, right? I believe, which is the mostly like African American led, like driven
Black
comic
Lightning.
book stories. Yeah, Black Lightning, absolutely.
I love Black Lightning.
So hopefully we can get those explored. I'm looking forward to all of it. I am going to be optimistic until given a reason not to be. That's how I've always been with DC. That's how I am with most things. You know, like Star Wars, if a project doesn't work for me, just like a comic book, you pick up the next one, right? Put that one down, move on. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. So I hope that if you guys weren't already feeling this way, that by listening to us, you're looking at giving DC more of a chance, or just checking out some of the things that we brought up. And I'll be going through these comments definitely later and seeing what kind of stuff I can add to the list. So thank you so much for joining us. Really quick before we head out, Ace, where can people find you if they don't already know?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok at Squad Leader Rays, and then my YouTube channel at First Cut and at First Cut TMO.
Perfect. And you can find me at Jesse Swift on Twitter here, obviously on this YouTube channel. That is Flick and Reel, where we often do shows Friday nights. Those are Friday night speakeasies. We're going to get those back on the calendar. Been a little busy lately. News and Views is coming back. And tomorrow over on, is it The Last American Heroes? I'm trying to remember the exact name of the channel, but if you know Benny and Moose from the Schmodown, we are going to be, you know what, that's not live, so I take that back. That's going to be recorded. Ignore that I said that. All right, guys, we'll catch you on the next video. Let's outro with this DC video one more time. Bye-bye.